You can take a seat, please.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Pick up the courtesy white.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council, September 21st, 2020, to order. We don't have a pastor here, so, sir, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Would you join me, please?
Catherine Card, Lisa Firth, and Webb Warren.
All right, and then we have our Mr. Menschel and Mr. Overdeer are online as well, and everyone else is in attendance here in person. All right, first up is the agenda approval.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add one item in my section at the end down here. We had talked at the last meeting about the realigning of the intersection of 4th and 1st Street. I'm bringing that back up tonight. It got omitted, but I'd like to bring it back up and try to get his decision tonight, if possible.
All right.
So that'll be under item E of 7.
All right, is there anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Menschel.
Pull 6D from the consent agenda, please. 6D dog.
Okay, we're going to pull 6D from the consent agenda, and where would you like to discuss that? Under, say maybe right after the city manager's announcements? Would that be a good place? You good with
Any
that?
place you want is fine, sir.
All right, we're going to move 6D to 4I.
Mayor, I need to move item 6. Is it 6B and 6C, Kyle? Both of them?
It is just 6C, actually.
6 what, C?
Yeah.
I need to move 6C off the consent agenda.
That would be the council ratification declaration of civic emergency.
Yep.
Okay.
Just move it to 4 after 4H. At the end
Okay.
of the city manager.
IJ, we'll make that 4J. How about that?
Thank you.
All right. I'll move this to 4J. All right, Ms. Ramswell.
I think I can fit all mine under the Hurricane Sally update, so no need for anything separate.
All right, sounds good. Anyone else? I don't know why I did that. I hit the wrong button. I was trying to clear the other one.
So I'll make a motion then to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Menschel.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, ayes have it, so moved. All right, first up, approval of the minutes. July 13th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion at this point.
I'll make that. Second.
I got a motion, I have a second. Is there any discussion on these minutes? Seeing none, we'll start down there with you, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Menschel.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Is that humming noise in my microphone only?
Yes.
Can we turn it down? I got a big mouth anyways. We don't need that much volume. All right. Up next, 1B, approval of minutes of June 29th, 2020, City Council Workshop.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Second.
I got a motion, got a second, and then any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Menschel?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ayes have it, so moved. All right, today under proclamation, recognition, special presentations, we got 2A, which is the Stallman Avenue US 98 intersection assessment project update made by Volker Engineering. And who's going to give that?
We have a few gentlemen here from Volkert Engineering. They're about to be joining us.
All right. Too bad we don't have that. Here we go. That Jeopardy music. We're efforting. Be patient with us.
Hello, Mr. Hooks, are you with us?
Yes, sir. I was waiting for, is Manny on the phone? Does it show that he's on here? Because he was going to be doing the initial presentation, and then I would take it over at alternative 3.
Yes,
Am I
he
the-
is online as well. If you can hear me, Manuel, it looks like you've joined through your audio with the telephone. You should see a pin on your screen. You need to enter that so I can unmute you. Or if you'd like to try unjoining and then rejoining using your computer audio instead, you can do so as well. Looks like you did switch over to the computer audio. If you'll just press the microphone button, you should be able to begin.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, so I'll get started now. Good evening, everyone. My name is Manny Richardson. I'm with Volkert. I am the Florida Region Traffic Engineering Group Leader. And today I will be discussing the Stallman Avenue Intersection Assessment Project that we're currently working on. Next slide, please. First, we'll go over the scope of services of our study. The purpose of this study is to evaluate the intersection of US 98 and Stallman Avenue and the adjacent intersection of Stallman Avenue and Zerby Street. The goal is to identify any potential improvements that can improve the traffic flow through these intersections, as well as pedestrian safety in the project vicinity. Our assessment first began with data collection activities. This included both traffic count data as well as previous year crash data review in the project vicinity. Next, we analyzed the data gathered and performed an existing conditions assessment. This included an evaluation of existing traffic operations as well as a review of crash data. Following the existing conditions assessment, we began the development of various improvement alternatives. In total, we identified 3 potential alternatives that were analyzed under future conditions. Today, we're presenting some of those findings to the City Council prior to a local concerns meeting for the public. There, our alternatives will be presented to the public and will be allowed to provide any comments and feedback. Following that meeting, we'll summarize our findings in a technical memorandum. In our existing conditions assessment, we found that the intersection of US 98 and Stallman Avenue is currently operating at a level of service D in the AM, PM, and weekend peak hours. Next slide, please. The first alternative we'll discuss today is the timing modification alternative. One of the first things we noticed when we began to evaluate the intersection was the pedestrian timings not being accommodated within the coordinated timing cycle length. The issue that can occur with this is that when both side street pedestrian movements are activated, the intersection is not able to serve those pedestrians while also remaining in coordination. What then happened is the intersection momentarily drops coordination in order to serve those pedestrian movements. Following that, it has to cycle back into coordination with the rest of the US 98 corridor. The number of pedestrians at this intersection, this can be happening multiple times throughout the day. The improvement we recommend would be to accommodate the pedestrian movements within the program cycle. This would eliminate the potential disruption along the corridor when you have many pedestrian actuations. Next slide, please. The second alternative is a build alternative. Under this alternative, we're proposing to add an additional southbound lane on Stallman Avenue and also modifying the intersection of Stallman and Zerby Street. There's various improvements that are benefits to this modification. Next slide, please. Here's a zoomed in picture of the build alternative and some of the details as far as the changes we'll be proposing. The main change is converting the intersection of Stallman and Zerby's to a right in, right out. In our crash data analysis, we noticed that there's quite a few accidents that are occurring with vehicles turning left in and out of Zerby's and Stallman. Another item would be the removal of the crosswalk that's currently providing access from the community center over to the Whataburger. This crosswalk is uncontrolled and is in close proximity to the signalized intersection. It's not providing as much benefit as it's also creating a hazard to those pedestrians crossing in that location. Under this alternative, we're also extending the storage lanes for the southbound movement. Stallman is the busier of between Stallman and the northbound intersection. And we noticed that you'll get a lot more operational benefits through improvements along Stallman while maintaining your 4 lanes through US 98. Next, Arthur Hooks, our project manager, our Volker project manager on this project, is going to speak on the additional alternatives we're analyzing as part of this project.
All right, thank you, Manny. Can we go to not the next slide, but the one after? One of the alternatives and this is actually being alternative 3, we knew that there was an issue with the pedestrians crossing at grade. And as Manny explained before in the signalization alternative, when the pedestrians come up to the buttons and they use a push button, they cause a delay between the existing traffic that is traveling on 98. One of the ways to accomplish separating pedestrians from this traffic would be use an overpass alternative. And another reason that we're looking at this is for the safety. In the last 5 years, within this small segment of corridor at Stallman Avenue, there were 10 accidents. Actually, there was 11, but one of those was at Calhoun and US 98. Of the 10 accidents, 2 of those were fatalities. And so we were looking at general opportunities where potential pedestrian crossings could be located with minor impacts to businesses, or where we'd minimize impacts to businesses or parking spaces. And that's what we did, is we picked some of the green areas, or areas where you might lose 1 parking space, that could allow this type of separation. And the separation could be served with elevators for your ADA access, and that way you could minimize your footprints with the stairways that would be required. We've used this in several other tourist corridors along the Gulf Coast, and so this has been a proven method in some areas. The ideal cost for these is $1.5 to $2 million, and as I said, this is more about the safety in separating pedestrians from the traffic, but it does also offer some benefits to the level of capacity for the traffic along US 98. Next slide. We all know that there was a DOT corridor study that was completed a few years ago. I believe it was 2016. We did look at the recommendations that were made during that, and what we did for this study was we were limited to Stallman Avenue and this immediate area. So we concentrated on what could be done in this area, but thinking through to what the future could bring for DOT's recommendation and a PD&E or design later on. While the DOT has recommended a dedicated right, through, and left turn movement on both the north and southern legs, what we've done is we've given you a dedicated right, a dedicated left, and a combination through and left for the southbound approach, or on the north side, but the southbound as you're going towards US 98. And the reason why is by having 2 left turns, and one was a combination of the through, you're actually not increasing the level of the delay that you would not increase the delay that is along US 98, but you could actually still allow more traffic, because they found that there'd be more left turns going on to US 98 from the north side of the roadway. We actually did look at if we were to realign the intersection, and that would actually require the city would have to purchase Whataburger, because to meet the design criteria, your curvature would end up meaning the intersection would come in where the driveway for Whataburger is for the exit, and Whataburger could no longer cease to exist, and they wouldn't be able to operate. Additionally, you'd have to realign the intersection on the southern side for that southern leg, and the parking for Coyote Ugly between the existing drive and the Coyote Ugly Saloon would have to be eliminated, and it would end up impacting the number of parking spaces for Harbor Walk. At this time, since the city does not have a development order in the process for any deviation in Harbor Walk Village, we didn't want to make recommendations that the city couldn't move forward with on their own. By making the improvements to the north, you would just have minor right-of-way impacts to the west side of Stallman Avenue, as well as some minor impacts to one of the parking spaces there at Whataburger. And we concentrated on what the city could do at this time. But as I said, later on, if the city wanted to take a look and modify the rights, the lefts, and the through lanes on the northbound leg, it could be moved forward to having the north, the south, and right, left, and dedicated through movements. It could be coordinated later on with the DOT study. As the ATMS, or the Advanced Traffic Management System, since we were only looking at this one intersection, that's what we were tasked with, we did not do any further coordination efforts for a corridor-wide ATMS system. Next slide. I just want to say thank you all for y'all's time. Is there any questions? I know there's a lot of information that's in here, and so if there's any questions, we're happy to discuss further any type of delays and showing how in the future this type of improvements where you have your right, your left, and your dedicated right-left could be used and what effects it would have.
All right, we got a couple questions. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation to start off with. A couple questions. Some of the items don't, well, maybe I'm wrong. Okay, I do see some of the pricing or estimated cost. But what about with the overpass? What is the height necessity in terms of 18-wheelers and such that actually come through here? And then, of course, I would think there'd be added cost for signage, warning signage saying, you know, trucks over such and such height can't come, essentially. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, actually what we have looked at, and this is just because it's state road, we would go with the standard height clearance or vertical clearance, and I believe that's just saying industrial manufacturers moving a big silo or something like that. That's something that's a little bit different. I don't know if that actually happens too often down in the downtown area for Destin. But the idea is it would be designed to meet state standards, which would allow for all your traffic.
Thank you. And this is actually my favorite option, but thought about.
Yes, ma'am. We actually did. That was one of the first things we did because we actually are doing the underpass there at 30A and US 98. One of the differences you have over there is you have a lower water table, or a seasonal high water table as we call it. We spoke to other geotechs that have done business for some of the developers in the area in this around Stallman, and what we've been told is that the water table is too high to allow for a underpass, and the department or DOT, from experience, would not want to build basically a mound across an overpass to allow that to happen. In this type of area, you would have sight distance issues, and so underpass is not a preferred or viable option or alternative.
Okay, and then my last question / comment was, we had also talked about either closing Zerby right there or making it one way. Do you see either of those options facilitating traffic movement?
Manny, do you want to take this one? Because I know we discussed that a couple times.
Sure. So we looked at the traffic at Derby's, and one of the things we noticed was, or as we pointed out, were the crashes there. And keeping in mind, instead of keeping access available for any future improvements for any parallel facilities, we thought it may be beneficial to keep some access at Zerby's, that being through right in, right out versus a full access intersection, instead of completely shutting them off and overloading the Stallman US 98 intersection. So we did consider the options of closing that off, but we thought it may be more beneficial to provide some access, whether that being a little more limited than it is today, versus completely shutting that off and turn it into a single direction corridor. Just in case there is a future parallel facility where you want that access to the neighboring west neighborhood without getting on US 98.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for this information. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Ramswell. Up next, I got Mr. Marlar.
Thank you, Mayor. Staying with the overpass, since you mentioned elevators, about who would be responsible for the maintenance of the elevators, and I'm guessing emergency services would take care of getting somebody out of it if they got stuck, but who would be responsible for maintaining those elevators if you were to go that route?
It would have to be the operating entity. You know, just like Stormwater Pond, a lot of times you have an operating entity that is named for it, and that's something that could be coordinated and designed. But at this time, if the city moved forward with it and you owned it, it would be up to y'all unless that y'all were able to possibly one of the owners. I mean, I see that we have this on the property by AJ's. If there was a benefit for them because they have parking to the north, maybe it's something that could be worked out with the entity down there. We have not moved that far on that alternative at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Up next, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. On the underpass, do you have any idea what the difference is in the water table? Difference between the one on 38 and the one in Stallman?
I would have to go back and look, but speaking to the geotechs that did borings in these areas previously, you had areas where the water table was 3 feet below the existing surface, and you had places 6 feet below. Neither one of those would be allowable for this because the minimum, to meet current standards, your underpass has to be 8 foot for vertical clearance on the inside for people walking. If you have a multi-use pass, you want, I think, 8 to 9. That way if somebody's riding a bike. Now, if you add that plus your pavement depth, I mean, you're looking at 10 to 12 feet below your existing grade. And there's,
I just find it hard to believe there's not enough there. That's a pretty good bluff on that end of town.
I mean, I spoke to 2 different geotechs. One was Southern Earth Sciences. The other one was Nova. There are people that we work with quite often. They each said they had projects within this corridor in the immediate area.
And what was the depth of the water table again? I'm sorry.
Anywhere from 3 to 6 feet from existing grade.
Right around that intersection?
In the immediate area of this, I can go back and pull the exact locations. But yes, just in the immediate area. I understand that the water table does fluctuate, but that's just what they had told me is in the immediate area of the project. I think one of them was somewhere in the Harbor Walk Village south of the intersection, and the other one was a little bit to the east of this existing site.
Yeah, doesn't Harbor Walk, don't they have, Kyra might know this, 3 or 4 stories below ground?
Yes, we have 2 stories of parking below ground.
So that's 20-something feet. So, I mean, I just don't know how the water table's, 3 or 6 feet when they have over 20 feet of parking garage underground.
I guess we could drill and find out.
I mean, that's something that would be a recommendation that we could do as we go out, and we would have to look and actually have a boring done in this location. As I said, we have spoke with the 2 geotechs, and that's what they said was in this immediate area. And since it was somewhat similar, difference between 3 and 6 is not a whole lot. We felt comfortable with it at this time.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. A couple of questions. You mentioned about a traffic count. at that location. What was the date of that traffic count?
They were collected the weekend of June 25th, so it'd be the June 25th.
Year or so ago. And at that time, they negatively spoke about overpasses, personnel carriers like we're recommending there.
Things that we would have to do further coordination with DOT. It's one of those things that you go in with them. You would end up with the improvements for capacity along this corridor. It's something that you could show as a benefit as well as risk.
If we were to put in a pedestrian overpass, what would you do along 98 to prevent foot traffic still cross? They're going to just try to cross the street. We're no better off. Would you put some sort of barrier there?
In the areas, I would say in the areas of the overpass, you would do what you can to deter pedestrian crossings. You won't ever actually get rid of, say, the crossings there at Stallman. Even the one on 30A, they're still going to have crossings at the intersection, even though they have an underpass. But the intent is for the people that tend to short circuit intersections, which we have seen where a person died, I think 3 years ago. I think it's been 3. They're crossing from McGuire's basically to Harbor Walk. It's for safety of those type of people, or even of the ones that you have that are the mid-block crossings. And that's where, as you'll see on one of the locations, it's adjacent to the mid-block for the AJ's parking area. If you were to remove those and just some heavier landscaping in the middle, if you give them stairs, that they have access that they can use.
Okay. And my last question is, we had information late last year that Emerald Grand was looking into, although with the Triple R, they added a right turn lane in Emerald Grand right after you get off the bridge. But there was talk with FDOT that they were going to give up some of their property for a dedicated right turn lane into Emerald Grand. Did you take that into consideration with your assessment? Or did you actually know, did you even know about it?
No, there was talk and there was discussion of that. And I don't know if Manny can answer that, but as was stated before, the alternatives that we looked at, if it's not out there now, it's not in the process of a DO, it's not in construction. As you saw, they came in and did the 3R job. The southern leg of that intersection, in process and workings and past with developers, sometimes a lot of things will be said, and there'll be some minor coordination with Whataburger, some minor coordination with Chevron, and there will have to be looking at some stormwater because we would impact the stormwater pond for the modifications on the northbound leg. But those are things that we felt that at this time the county could easily move forward with.
Taking a look at this, and I'm looking forward to the final report. I have to echo the sentiments of Rodney Braden. I live and work down there for my entire life, and this intersection sits on one of the highest elevation points in the city of Destin, and it is only several yards further south and lower in elevation where he's talking about that parking garage. So I understand that the geotechs gave you some preliminary data, but I would encourage you to more thoroughly look at an underpass option. It appears that there would be no better place in Destin to be able to pull one off there. But of course, science will tell us whether or not the water table truly is an issue, but I find it hard to believe that the water table is that close. It's almost at the peak of what we used to call Wildcat Mountain. So, gentlemen, if you could look into it, I think that's a more viable option that actually pedestrians would end up using instead of climbing upstairs to come back down the other side. People just inherently feel better about, at least the first part, going down a set of stairs, even though they forget that they'd have to go up another flight on the opposite end. So I think underpass, not to mention aesthetics, would be a better one to go with. So gentlemen, please, I'd encourage you to look at that as an option as we move forward through this process and we get your final report. Thanks.
May I add to that for just one moment?
Yes, go ahead.
Before we had the stormwater, or not stormwater, before we had what we were told for the seasonal high water table, we actually did move a little bit forward with that. The only concern with the underpass, or another concern with it, was the available footprint that you need for it. Because like with the one for 30A, and even we did a series of underpasses for Pensacola Beach, the footprint you need to allow for your ramps moving down so that people feel comfortable easily accessing it, and it's not just the stairs, you have to have AD access. Your footprint is greatly enlarged at that time, and it was just what type of impacts would you have to parking and businesses. But as you have requested, we will talk with the city about looking more at the seasonal high water table in that area and see what can be done. And we'll discuss it with the city after this.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ramswell's got another question.
Sorry, just one more for you. Was it ever looked at to do this overpass to the west of the Calhoun, Stallman, gosh, probably get the street right, to do it there on the west side of Stallman by the gas station to cross over?
That is, if we can come back to the slide that had the pictures with the overpass, if that can be brought back up to the screen. And we did look at one location, it's adjacent to the gas station and those parking. So we did look at that because I believe that's actually where a person or in the immediate vicinity where somebody was hit previously.
Yeah, and that's because I had the same concerns that Mr. Minshall did, that, we put this up even, 25 yards too far to the east, people are still going to try to hightail it across the street. So that's why I'd like to get as close to that intersection as we could.
So you want to be closer to the intersection for Stallman or closer to the intersection for
No,
Calhoun?
I mean, this model I think is good because it's right there.
Okay.
It's near Emerald Grand where obviously there's a lot of foot traffic going. But the other one, which
Yeah.
is on the other side down from Whataburger, that one concerns me because I feel like people would still feel like that's going the opposite direction from where they want to go, and everybody wants to take the path of least resistance and closest. So
that one on the far right that you're discussing was actually, that was looked at just because it was, I believe the same property owner. No, I'm sorry, that one was not. I was thinking that was one that had minimal impacts to parking and would have been to service the same property owner. Sorry about that.
no worries. Thank you.
All right. I know we're going to hear back from you some more, and we're going to have further discussion. The only concern I would have is we do have plans to do the under the bridge connection to to finish out our boardwalk, and the overpass might be a little bit of redundancy that would make it obsolete from the standpoint of foot traffic coming out of our Zerbe parking lots or McGuire's and stuff like that. So, but we got plenty of time to have that discussion. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very, very much for your presentation, and you've really put the wheels in motion and some ideas for us to consider, and we'll continue this discussion at the next appointed time. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move.
So, Mayor, what is the next step with this?
Yeah, we'll get a final report, Michael.
Okay, there it was right there. No, the next one. Oh, there we go. So the alternatives meeting presentation, that really was what was just offered. After this, we'll be taking those alternatives and putting them up on our website, that slideshow, and we'll be through our Facebook platform and the website, we'll be advertising that so folks can take a look at it for themselves, and if they have any questions, just like council had tonight, they'll be able to pose those to Volkert staff. And then in about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we'll have a go-to meeting for the community, because council wanted to have a community input. Because of COVID and everything else, it just became increasingly more difficult to actually have a face-to-face type of town hall or public meeting. So we've kind of steered it more toward a virtual town hall meeting, and Volkert staff will be present, city staff will be present, and just anyone in the general public can hear the presentation and ask questions live. And then following that, incorporating any suggestions by the council or citizens, any comments, the final technical memorandum will come out soon thereafter.
So we're looking at something coming back to us end of October?
Late October, 1st of November, probably.
Okay. Good deal. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 3, public comment. This is time for public comment on items that are on the agenda that are not public hearings, and we do have a couple public hearings tonight. So this is public comment on agenda items or things not on the agenda that might be bothering you. I will first recognize folks that are here and have them speak first. Then Matt, I'll look to you and see who you have online. And then Ray, I'll end up with you, seeing if you had any text messages and or emails with comments during the public comment. So we'll start right now in the recognizing folks here. And, Ms. Bell, you're posed, ready to rock, so come on up and push a button, and you know the drill.
I apologize. Real quick, gentlemen from Volkert, I do need to dismiss you at this time. If you'd like to rejoin, you're more than welcome to do so, but temporarily you will be dismissed from the webinar. Thank you again.
Sorry about that.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. In reference to Hurricane Sally, we didn't expect it to be it's for natural disasters, not speaking to, and I say that because one of the problems that we had on Holiday Isle was we had a lot of standing water, and we had a lot of out-of-town plates that were just driving around, and they were throwing water into properties. And it was a real problem when I was telling them that they shouldn't be doing that, because they're not creeping along the wake that was continuously pushed through. I'm just really kind of speaking from observations. It didn't affect my...
Driving slow because you could see what was taking place, especially down, I know exactly, on Gulf Shores Drive. It got real bad on the very...
Also, I'm very sorry to interrupt. I just want to remind everybody, if we could avoid trying to have 2 microphones on at the same time, that's going to help with the feedback thing.
And I saw that back in January of 2018 at a city council meeting that you guys passed resolution 1806 that gave money to phase 2 of the stormwater runoff master plan. It was for the amount of $62,150. First phase, you guys had given them $75,000, so it's a total of almost $100,000. Here's my question. There was a map of the entire city done for that project. The previous engineer had spoken to that. I would like to know if Holiday Isle was ever included in that mapping of that stormwater, because we definitely have a stormwater problem. I can go into details. This isn't the place or the time, but we definitely had a problem on our street, and it was not caused by us or the rain, and I'll leave it at that. And the last time that we had an event that was substantial to this would have been July 5th of 2013 when I looked back into my pictures document. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I think that's it.
Teresa Abear, Chair for Parks and Recreation. I just want to address something that I've had several citizens reach out to me on to the workshop request for the land use attorney's part, where it's got the Destin that y'all approve that date. We want that to happen, but we also want to make sure that this workshop is publicized for the public to attend. And because it's being set for next Monday night, that the word gets out through our Public Affairs, where it's notified on the Destin website as well as our Facebook page, because there is quite a keen interest in this property, as well as other options that folks want to suggest. So I want to make sure that the council does approve the date and does approve the workshop, but keep in mind that it's also Parks and Rec that need to be part of this workshop, and as many citizens that have any input as to the where, what, and how of this station. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Hey, Ray, was that date set when you sent out the emails to everyone? Because I got on my calendar for the 28th.
6 of the council members approved it, sir. 6 council members already approved it.
so basically, it's a done deal. We just need to get Catherine to publicize it. Have you put it on our, have you recorded it as an official meeting?
You can do that tonight. I think they're going to bring it up.
All right, it's on the agenda. Come on up.
Yes, it will be
Absolutely.
available virtually and in person. And that's why it's on the agenda, Mayor, so that you all can confirm that the date works for next Monday night.
We actually have 2 dates to confirm, right?
Yeah, October 6th is a separate dealing with undergrounding.
All right, next up in the room. Go ahead. Come on up. Seeing how there's so many people in here, I'll let you fudge.
So in reference to that meeting, workshop she's speaking about, when was the last time that our Parks and Recreation Committee met in reference to that? I mean, they were all here, they've been speaking out and talking, and I think that it's important that the committee at least has a chance to meet if they haven't. I think there was...
I'll address that.
Okay, thank you.
The city parks manager has asked us to wait till they're well, and because of COVID and because so many of those, the city members, the paid city members were out of commission, basically. We're set for the October Parks and Recreation meeting, but the September one is basically for tomorrow night is canceled. But that's the biggest issue, is that meeting, that workshop, which will be next Monday night. So that's basically where my team and I will also be here for the discussion and how we feel about it, okay?
Yep, sounds good to me. All right. I think that covers everybody here in the room. Matt, do you have anybody online?
No, sir.
No. How about you, Ray? Ray has something he wants to read out loud.
This is an email from Jennifer McPeak. Comments from 825 Cross Street. Comments regarding yard/organic waste disposal post-Hurricane Sally. I've called Waste Management 3 times and cannot seem to get an answer as to why our regularly scheduled pickup on Friday did not occur. There are some limbs and larger branches stacked in a neat pile, and the rest of the debris is in cans placed at the curb. This manner of disposal has never been refused by Waste Management in the past. No one on my side of the street had their yard waste picked up Friday, no matter how it was staged, and from what I can gather, there are plenty of other people with the same issue. Calls to Waste Management got routed to a centralized, out-of-state customer service center. They had no answer for why our pickup did not occur. They stated no special provisions were being allowed for, even given the fact that we just went through a named storm. They only quote the rules for normal yard waste pickup, and they flatly refused to transfer me to the local offices of Waste Management, where someone might have been able to provide information specific to this area and to this situation. Do you have information on yard waste pickup? Can we exceed the traditional parameters to get rid of the unusual volume of organic debris caused by the storm? In our case, if we are constrained by the rules governing disposal, it will take us weeks to rid ourselves of the debris shaken out by the storm. That doesn't even allow for regular yard waste that needs to be hauled away each week. In the meantime, that debris is sitting in piles, getting soaked by rain and sprinklers, killing grass and providing nesting spots for rats and other pests. Finally, can you add cleanup instructions as part of your city emergency communications protocols? I know for certain we are not the only household dealing with this. We have a resilient and industrious community, and lots of folks were out the very next day cleaning up and trying to put things right again. It would be nice if Waste Management would partner with us to put these events behind us in a more efficient manner. Thank you for your time and for any direction you can provide.
Thank you, Ray. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been speaking with Deputy City Manager Webb Warren about this, and I will bring it up when we do the Hurricane Sally update.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. That winds up our public comment period, and so we're going to move right on to item 4A, City Manager Report, and I guess Lance will be giving that to us via the web. Good afternoon, good evening, Lance, good to see you.
Good evening, good to see you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. First off, I wanted to take a moment to thank all of the staff for the hard work they've put in over the last week and a half. They did a lot of prep work, and then during the event and then post-event, a lot of them have been going nonstop. Michael Burgess and the Public Works crew have been out there working around the clock, whether they're cutting trees up, cutting branches off the roadways, pumping water. They've been out there. Likewise, Lisa Firth and her crew have been out there assisting however they can, doing the same things and trying to get our parks to the point where they can reopen safely. They also worked with members of the community. Destin has always impressed me how the residents respond to situations just like this. I know over the weekend, a faith-based group from Shoreline Church was out volunteering to clean up property that it's not theirs. They just wanted, they take great pride in the community and wanted to see Destin recover as quickly as possible. So I appreciate the efforts of the community, and there are other events like that being planned. Miss Card was up around the clock during the event. I was getting emails from her 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I appreciate the efforts of just all of the staff. Joey Forgione and his crew were out there trying to maintain things to the best of their ability. They were reporting, they were documenting. I think probably we have the best documentation of damages that we've ever had. So just a hats off to them, and a hats off to the council for your continued support through this whole event. We didn't expect it to come as close as it did, and that thing turned, and so I appreciate the continued support of council on it too. So first up, I'm going to go with the Hurricane Sally update. Mr. Burgess has a brief presentation for you, and then we'll be happy to answer questions as we go through it. Mr. Burgess.
All right. Thank you, Lance. Mayor and City Council, it's my pleasure to give you an update on last week's activities concerning Hurricane Sally. Again, it kind of, I don't want to say it caught us off guard, but we certainly didn't imagine it would shift as much as it did. But like the city manager said, staff was up to the challenge and responded. And can I go ahead and get the next slide there, James? Unfortunately, the Destin Executive Airport's weather station went down in the middle of the storm. So I had to call the National Weather Service over in Mobile to see if I could get some information directly from them, and they confirmed that that weather station had gone down. So the next closest National Weather Station, wind speed that they recorded there was 48 miles an hour sustained throughout the duration of this event. Just taking them one at a time, I'll discuss probable causes, the city's response, and any after actions. The first is Heritage Run. Back a few years ago, the city installed a pumping system. There they would discharge water that subdivision collected into a swale over on the Fort Benning MWR side across Calhoun. Again, we received 15.6 inches plus or minus of rain in a relatively short period. And the pumps were operating or were operated by one of our city staff persons. We did have a technical glitch with it, the auto setting. It wasn't really behaving itself in the auto setting, so we had to run it in the on setting, which required more kind of a hands-on approach. I'm glad to report that Gilbert Pumps, who installed that system, was on site today to make some adjustments to the system. So hopefully when we do have our next Sally, we won't go through the same difficulties we had this time. We man this system periodically through the night, operating it in the on mode. There are 3 pumps in that system. 2 are 5,000 gallon a minute, and 1 is a 500 gallon a minute. It's more of a maintenance pump. But next time, we had a few lessons learned through this one. The system has been addressed today and adjusted, so hopefully next time we won't have this issue. Okay, next slide. Quail Court.
Michael, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because I went by there a couple times all throughout the night. You guys did a hell of a job. Is that enough pumping? Do we need another pump there?
Okay.
I mean, we may not get 15 inches of rain in less than 30 hours again, but it seems like we're having these 100-year rains about every 2 years.
That would not be unusual. I mean, a 1% chance event or a 100-year storm is typically, there is a kind of a cookie cutter storm that model would follow as far as intensity and duration and, again, its frequency. Tropical storms don't normally behave that way, so it's not your typical hydrograph. What you saw the other night at Calhoun was our guys pumping from an area that's not serviced by that Heritage Run system. So they were pumping from I guess that's the south side to the north side. That operation went on for many, many hours, and it was just a lot of rain in a low-lying area under a relatively short duration. If you know, you asked the question if we need more pumps or larger pumps. I can't help but answer yes to that question. However, we do have 5 pumps. We have a 2-inch pump, 2 3-inch pumps, a 4-inch pump, and a 6-inch pump. So, and they're all operational. The 6-inch pump is actually at the crab trap right now, attempting to pump down the Four Prong Lake. And Destin water users, I'll mention this in my shout out at the end of this presentation, but Destin water users really saved us by loaning us some of their sewage pumps to accomplish some of the pumping that was required at the time.
Mr. Destin has a question, I think, along the same lines.
Yeah, Mr. Burgess, to what extent was the storm surge, which clearly got close to what we experienced in Hurricane Ivan, did that affect our ability to properly discharge into the swale that's adjacent to the MWR Army Rec Center? And are we bumping up? I mean, is it much past that storm surge where we just don't have a low-lying area to drain into? I mean, are we reaching that limit when we get to that 4, 5, 6 foot storm surge?
Yeah, what you're referring to is called a tailwater effect, and it certainly did not help matters. We've had several situations in different parts of Destin where tailwater was an issue. Another one I'll mention is over around the Nature Trail over on Beach Drive. When the bay gets up, that system cannot discharge because it's pushing against the bay. And so you have to pump over and up and over a ridge like Beach Drive to get water to move. Very similar situation to this one. Okay? Okay, so that was Heritage Run. Okay, next up is Quail Court. Quail Court is a private development of townhomes and duplexes over off Airport Road. Their retention area was completely inundated, and it's a closed system, meaning that those homes, and just like Ms. Bell mentioned a moment ago, when cars drive through it, it creates a wake. And that wave action can lap over a threshold. You know, if you thought you were in really good shape and it just got right to the door and then some car drives through, and now you've got you got water in the house. But we had 4 to 6 inches out on the road, and like I said, the retention area was completely full. And so the city set up a 4-inch pump, and we pumped it over to the Gulf Power easement as we've done in years past. It only had to do that for a few hours before we got the roads dry again. The after action on this one, unfortunately, is none, because there is no, other than setting up a permanent pump station, this would be the method used to do that. And I have our department, I'll be talking to the city manager and the deputy city manager about kind of reminding these private properties of their own responsibility as far as drainage is concerned in the future, for future events. Okay, the next one.
Michael, I'm sorry,
okay.
if I could interrupt. it just occurs to me that this is a development. Clearly it was built, but there's not sufficient drainage that was built when the development was built. Why is that? And why could we not create an infrastructure after the fact to absolve that problem?
Our design storm, you normally don't design stormwater management systems for hurricane type events. You build them for the 60th to 80th percentile event, perhaps, whether or not it's an inch of runoff or an inch of rain or the 25-year storm. These are all kind of intensity and duration and frequency measures that engineers use to design these things. This one in particular, along with a couple of others, they have no natural outlet, so the only metering device is the ground taking that water. And if, like it was mentioned a few moments ago, if the ground is saturated or the water table is high, that water has nowhere to go. So it is a challenge. And we'll talk about a few more here coming up that have the exact same situation. Okay, but again, we set up a pump, we ran it for a few hours, got it pulled down off the street. We knew it wasn't going to rain much anymore, so we pulled up our stakes and moved on to the next site. Okay, this is, oh, I skipped my own slide. Calhoun Drive, this is where the mayor saw us at the other night. We were having a good time out there. Again, this is an area not directly serviced by the Heritage Run pump system. This is drainage from several adjacent lots. And we set up pumps and we were pumping it over to Calhoun onto the MWR site. And we thought we had it pulled down, but then it started to fill up again, so we had to go pump some more. And again, the after action, we learned a lot about the behavior of that pumping system over there, because apparently, it was put in before I was here, but apparently this was its first real test. And so we, again, like I said last time with the Hurricane Laura, we always learn, you have to learn lessons after every one of these events. No one's perfect, no system is perfect. You have to, plan, do, check, and act. So we're always having to make modifications, and I think we learned a few things about that system and how it operates. And next time, hopefully we won't have to be there for 30 hours, just a little less than that. Okay, next slide, James.
Michael, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes, sir.
How many homes right there where you had the 4 pumps actually had water in them?
Definitely one. And almost another one. I didn't go back into the area. I just stayed right there on Calhoun because that water got deep pretty quick. But I stayed up there on Calhoun. But it was a couple of homes back in there. We just tried to do our best to alleviate that, because here's the other issue. Like Councilor Destin mentioned, when the bay starts to come up, there's a sluice gate we close. It's necessary.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe's Bayou. Okay, Joe's Bayou around 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Streets. The bay encroached into the park, damaging some of the docks. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then it crossed over Beach Drive at 2 locations, really, right there at the park and then down at the Mattie Kelly Pier, the Nature Walk area. City closed that park because it was not safe. We didn't want any, folks going in there just to kind of look at the water. And then the other after action will be that we'll go clean all that up this week. Again, I talked to Councilor Marler about this situation this morning. Across Beach Drive is a low-lying area, and again, you just have to wait for gravity to do its thing, and the bay has to recede. It's a large area of shallow flooding. Once it got over Beach Drive, which kind of acts as a dam.
This situation occur over there?
Ooh, I could not. I've only been here like a year and a half, so I could not tell you.
They're telling me it's every hurricane we've had.
Okay. Well, then we'll know how to plan for next time. All right. James, let me have the next slide there. Okay, Indian Bayou, we have filtration systems that take the water into perforated pipes and allow it to soak into the ground. That's probably the most prevalent technique of looking at there is Indian. If you notice on the inside of that little shape there, the streets form, there's a little green patch kind of in the upper right-hand corner on the inside of the street. Well, that is the discharge point for that system. And after it discharges into that wooded area, it flows under the road out to the bay. At some point during the event, some pine straw and yard waste and whatnot had gotten that pipe. It discharges out what I've been heard is called a bubble up structure. I've been doing stormwater management for 20 years and I've never heard of that. It's a Destin thing. It's a Florida thing. But the water actually has to move up to get out. And apparently this pine straw had partially blocked the pipe, so it wasn't performing optimally. Staff went over there, cleared it, and that subdivision had drained within a matter of hours afterwards. The after action for this one, that property where that bubble up structure is located is owned by the Indian Bayou HOA, and we'll certainly be working with them to come up with a more permanent solution that's less maintenance intensive. And also we'll be researching easements in that area to determine, who's responsible for maintenance and whatnot. Okay, next slide, James.
So I have to weigh in on Indian Bayou, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but up front, those 3 houses on this side that include me and the 3 houses on the county side, the people behind me did get water in their homes, and it came up to within 2 inches of getting in my house. So
it's one of the areas to be addressed in the master plan.
thank
All right. Four Prong Lake. This is another closed basin. It drains Destiny East, some commercial property south of 98, and it is a closed basin. That lake does not have any natural discharge. So again, Scenic 98 kind of acts as a dam, if you will, and the water just can't get out. It does fill up, though, the stormwater collection system on the other side of the road. And so the level of the lake should closely match the system elevation right here where these 2 pumps are set up. We have had one 4-inch pump. Our 4-inch pump is the one closer to the photographer there. We've had that running since Thursday. And then the second one was generously loaned to us by Jacksonville Utilities. It's another 6-inch pump, and we've had it running since Friday evening or early Saturday morning. These pumps individually have a capacity of about 1,000 gallons a minute, but we've had to kind of tune them down a little bit because we don't want to run them dry. So we're running them kind of at maybe 2/3 a piece. And it's pumping out anywhere from 1,400 to 1,600 gallons a minute out onto the beach.
Mike, I have a question on that if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
Those 2 pumps, as you just noted, are in fact pumping Four Prong Lake, but you don't have anything pumping Sunset Lake. And I've probably had a half a dozen people stop me today. Sunset Lake is equally as high. The docks are all covered with water and encroaching in the backyards, and there's no pumps on Sunset Lake. Any plans on trying to pump that as well?
Forgive me, Councilor Marlar. Where is Sunset Lake exactly? Is that the second lake, the other lake to the west?
Correct. It's the lake in Destiny. Okay, the stormwater not only runs into the Four Prong Lake, it also runs into Sunset Lake as well. And that one needs just as much attention as Four Prong does.
Okay, we'll have to investigate that one, Councilor Marlar, to see if those 2 lakes are connected somehow. The ease of pumping down Four Prong is available because of the adjacency of the crab trap, parking lot, and that inlet.
Right, I understand. That's been pumped in the past, and it basically came out of Destiny and went right across to the lake, and when they pumped it right, basically the automobile access to the beach on the west side of the beach, they ran the lines in there the last time the city pumped that lake.
Okay, we'll
It
take
went right
a look
across.
at that first thing in the morning.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, next slide, James, I'm sorry. Or about that delay. Other flooded areas included Gulf Shore Drive. We did have several pockets of water developed that could not drain off through gravity. Again, kind of little micro-closed basins. The Gulf Breeze Court and Gulf Winds Court had a pretty appreciable amount of standing water on them. And so again, we set up pumps there. We had 2 4-inch pumps running. Oh, it was actually a 6 and a 4 we had running for several hours to drain those down. The follow-up on this one involves kind of an examination of adjacent property drainage systems, because we did notice that there was some what appeared to be off-site runoff, kind of compounding the problem. But we'll certainly be looking at that over the next several weeks or months, trying to figure out exactly where this water is coming from. I have researched the development drawings for some of the adjacent properties, and the results have not been promising yet, but hopefully we'll be, through our investigation, be able to determine exactly where this water is coming from. And then, next slide, James, I'm sorry. Damage to other city facilities. It's not really water that can destroy, partially water can destroy property, but wind is also a factor as well. And we did have some wind here after the rain event, softening up the soils nicely so trees can fall over. And we had a few casualties as part of that. We had the old post office at the Fishing Museum. There's an oak tree that fell and kind of took out the corner of it. Good news is there's not a lot of damage on the interior of the building, it's just exterior. Joe's Bayou Docks, we had boards popping up there. Leonard Destin Beach area, the sand kind of got blown out in that area over there, so we'll be certainly taking a look at repairing that and getting that section of that park back open. Morgan Sports Center building itself had some vinyl siding issues. The Mattie Kelly Pier, we lost some handrails and boards. The Noriego Point property, it kind of shifted some sand a little bit, and we'll see when the sand fully recedes what it's looking like. And then lastly, we had a few traffic signals at Sandpiper Cove at Gulf Shore Drive get decapitated. Those are called traffic signal heads, so I'm saying they got decapitated. And the county is aware of that. The signals are on flash right now, so it is an operating intersection. Doesn't require sheriff's office supervision. All right, next.
Michael, is Noriego Point there on the east side? Is that still sort of, I don't think it was breached, but it was definitely like a river runs through from East Pass to the harbor.
Right, it left a little bird bath out in the middle.
Okay.
But we'll have to go back out with our surveying equipment and just kind of take a few measurements to see what the sand's elevations are and where.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that water was still crossing across or whether it had dried up.
Yeah, it had dried up almost immediately after the event. When I went out there on Saturday, I believe there was just a kind of a bird bath out there, kind of a quarter-acre bird bath sitting out there. Seagulls around it. Okay, beach erosion. We did have some beach erosion and material loss. I'd like to thank Joey and Code Compliance for providing these pictures. They handled some beach scouring and affected structures on both public and private property. Now, the city response, we have collected debris and sections of wooden structures from our beach parks already, and we'll be coordinating with the county for beach raking and the reconstruction of damaged public amenities like our dune walkovers and whatnot, and a pickup of damaged beach vendor structures. We'll be coordinating that. We'll be coordinating with those that will be doing that. Volunteer groups have already begun cleaning the beaches along with city staff, which is the next slide, James. And just like to give a shout out to Shoreline Church. They came out yesterday and cleaned up sections of the beach. And I know those pictures are kind of far off, but that dump trailer is full of wood and other debris, storm-borne debris. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this is my shout-out slide here. Without these groups right here, with this, we would have been in more of a pickle than we were. These guys really were clutch. Destin Water Users with the loaning of their pumps and the fire control district. The people all week over the weekend say, Michael, you did such a great job. Michael didn't do a great job. We did what I think was a great job, and would not have been possible for 1 second without our team in Parks and Public Works and Public Information, the city management team, and community development. Absolutely clutch, every one of them. And last slide is the question slide. And I actually took that picture the day after it all happened. And so it's just another beautiful day in Destin with a lot of work ahead of us.
All right, does any of the council members have anything that they'd like to ask? Michael? You did a great job. Appreciate the briefing. Your team was spectacular, and they earned their keep during the storm. And hopefully that's the last one we got to deal with in 2020. Rodney.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael, I just got a few questions. I've lived here and been through a lot of hurricanes, and a lot of the staff we have now have not. One question, let's start with Destiny. Not long ago, I guess the developer come to council and wanted us to approve allowing them to continue to build those homes close to the lake. We were trying to move them back. Does anybody remember that? And it was approved that they could continue to build those homes close to the lake. So if that's what they wanted to do and they're flooding out, I think they should get their own 6-inch pumps and pump their own lake out, just like Silver Shells did. Their garage is all flooded, and they have 6-inch pumps now, and they don't rely on somebody else because they built them that way, and they're pumping their own garages out now. So somebody needs to see if Destin can get their own pumps and not rely on the city of Destin. If that's what they want to, the problem they want to create, then they need to deal with it themselves. We can surely go help them out, when everybody else has helped. Also, everybody did an amazing job, but I also like to take it as a learning experience as well, of the things of, what we should have done or could have done, or, like you said earlier, it's a learning curve. I still don't know why we had one, maybe 2 homes flooding on Calhoun, but we had 4 homes in Indian Bayou with water in them, and there was 0 pumps in Indian Bayou. And we had every pump we had trying to keep water out of one house. And then we had a 4-inch pump sitting on the trailer at Public Works that wasn't being used at all. And then when they did show up with the 4-inch pump at Indian Bayou, they had 700 feet of hose, but they could only use 200 feet of it because they didn't have connections to connect the hose. And then they could only run the pump for maybe 2 minutes to fill up a little swell by the road, and then they had to shut it off. So I want us to try to be more prepared when we are in hurricane season, when that comes around, to have our pumps, have everything, ready to go, everything we need. In my opinion, it should have been. And this $1 million pump that we have over at Heritage Run, do we have that? I know we can't flood it to see if it's going to come on automatically, but do we maintain that pump, or is there like a monthly, bi-monthly, 6 months inspection, see if it's running? It's just aggravating that thing, we spent, $1.5 million on it. It failed basically until we run over and kicked it on ourselves. How often is that pump maintained or ran or checked out?
There are 3 pumps in that vault. There's a 500-gallon-a-minute pump that runs routinely when we have our normal run-of-the-mill events, heavier events slightly. But again, this was the first real test of that system in a hurricane situation. And what we can do is probably work with Destin water users in the future and set up a meter, and then we'll just flood those vaults for a few minutes, and just to make sure they'll actuate when they're supposed to actuate. But again, we did have Gilbert pumps on site today to kind of give them the once over.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I think that's all I have. That's all I have as far as the storm stuff was concerned. But again, thanks a lot. I know I was burning your phone up myself and burning Webb's phone up during that whole ordeal. But thanks a lot, and if you can keep us abreast on what, like you said, what we're working on and the drainage at Indian Bayou and other places, and what your recommendations are as far as fixing these things. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Braden. Dr. Ramswell?
Thank you, Mayor. And I had a couple questions / comments, just sort of running the gamut here. First of all, I guess I want to start with beach debris, and there was an awful amount of debris on the beach, as we all know. And it seemed like there were some issues coordinating who was cleaning up, when, how, and Beach Service Group LLC, and they decided to go ahead and rent dumpsters and a truck on their own to go ahead and pull debris off the beach, going out of pocket $1,500 just to improve the appearance of the beach. They were really concerned, as were other people, that the beaches were packed. I mean, the rain stopped and people were like, woohoo, time to go out to the beach. And they did not care that there were boards with nails and all sorts of other debris out there that was extremely hazardous. So one of the things I wanted to ask was, what sort of a plan can we work on with, I guess, the county or whomever to try to help facilitate information, get it out there, and also really improve that debris cleanup and how people can help if they want to? Because I feel like that's an area that could be improved upon.
Preble, are you talking about the beach vendors you talked to? Is that private beach?
I think they went all up and down in the whole area and did several sections. They definitely did their own private, but they expanded and did part of June Decker.
Yeah, I would, with the private beach, I wouldn't have much of an issue with them having to come out of pocket to,
oh, sure.
That's the only issue I see with the beaches, but otherwise.
But they abut June Decker, and that, of course, it was just overflowing and a massive debris.
Sure.
So I didn't know if Michael was going to comment on that, because I have more.
I probably think that would be more appropriate for Lisa or Lance to address, if you don't mind me.
Good point. And I do know Lisa contacted me and said that she was working on trying to coordinate with something with the county. So, yeah, Lisa, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening. Well, I'm not sure about June White Decker, because we did clean that. All of our beach properties, parks, had those cleaned. I think that was by the second day. I believe, I think that was the first day that we could get out there. Second day was Norrego Point. So all of our beach properties that we maintain, we got down there and cleaned the parts that we're responsible for and what the county was responsible for, which is down on the beach, but we picked all that up. The private properties, we spent all day yesterday, and that one dump truck that you saw, there were 4 of those that Shoreline and city staff were out there, and we picked up from June White Decker, well, back porch, June White Decker was done, back porch all the way to Sandpiper. And all it was beach vendor boxes. So that's what I can say on the beaches.
Thank you, and I'm so glad y'all were able to do that. I know there was a lot of debris in the water, so even after some of the beaches had been picked up, new stuff was floating back up, and that's just the nature of the beast. But did you all feel that the coordination was sufficient, or is that an area that we can all work on to try to improve coordination and cooperation?
I believe that it needs to be our number one priority when we get that beach meeting back in order, because yes, there's a lot I think we can do better.
Well, thank you for what you did do. I know it just became so ultra packed immediately that, you know, it's just a danger. So it's a hazard zone. So I'm not sure what we can do. I mean, we can't necessarily prevent people from going out on the beach, or can we? I mean, especially if it's a dangerous situation. I didn't hear of anybody being impaled by a board, but that's not to say that things are there that, you know, could certainly do it. But that's just a concern and maybe something to think about in the future.
Excuse me, Dr. Randall,
Sure.
we did immediately go out there and, you know, do what we could as far as every beach access of our beaches. We had closed off, caution taped. We put stuff, what we could, you know, so nobody would step on anything. But, you know, people don't care. They just went on the beaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I guess the next question / concern, and we all had power, we had everything, no problem until Friday, and that line had hung down and was just almost perfectly blocking the entire Drifting Sand Trail road so that you couldn't get out to go into Indian Bayou from that street. Well, apparently what my husband was told from the Cox technician who went out early Friday morning was somebody had severed it, and you could actually see how it was roughly done and not a smooth cut through the line. Well, I've been checking with Webb, and I know, I mean, you've got the entire subdivision that had no Cox services whatsoever, but thankfully today, I know Webb was working really hard to try to get that fixed. I know a lot of people did get all their services returned today, which is a wonderful thing, but a lot of folks, especially up at the front of the neighborhood, are still missing internet. But it's just another example of, you know, people were calling and being told to be the 28th, and certainly having cable and TV is not a necessity when people don't have power, but when they're telling people they're out there, and we've been out there all day, and we can look at the line right down the street and see people weren't there, people were getting really, really frustrated. So I want to thank Webb for really diligently working with the county to try to get the emergency management, I guess that's the council or whatever the EOC is, to actually get involved in trying to get that back on out there, because especially with kids doing school from home right now, and with COVID, many people working from home, not having internet was costing kids from being able to do their classes and such today. So it was a bigger problem than it seems on the surface. It's not just about, I'm missing the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, you know. So moving on from that, and I guess my final comment is about the yard debris and the issues with the collection. And we heard from a citizen who wrote in earlier. I got tagged in a Facebook post where people were going on, and I just wanted to see if you could weigh in a little, facilitate pickup for, God forbid, you know, the next time we have to go through something like this. So Webb, if you wouldn't mind weighing in. I thought you were there.
Can you hear me now?
There you are, okay.
Okay, sorry about that. A little technical difficulty. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, and I appreciate the time, Dr. Ramswell. Staff has been in regular contact with Waste Management before and since Hurricane Sally. Due to the volume, the obvious volume of yard debris after the hurricane, Waste Management did notify us that they sent out 6 trucks on Friday 9 trucks on Saturday, and also an additional truck on Sunday to try to keep up with the yard debris. They were not able to pick it all up because there was such volume, but they wanted to ensure that they were keeping up with the contract standards, which is at least 2 cubic yards per Friday. Code and public services staff will be working with Waste Management this week in order to monitor how much debris is still accumulating in Destin. At this time, if staff or Waste Management does not believe that they have the resources necessary in order to pick up the amount of storm debris generated, then staff would like to examine third-party options to assist, which could be our storm debris removal contractor. However, these options are generally designed for a lot larger scale operations than the amount of debris we are currently seeing. Additionally, we'd like to increase our public information on solid waste pickup as we continue through the recovery phase. And again, if staff does see debris outweighing Waste Management's resources to clean up, we could schedule a special meeting immediately before or after next week's workshop to further address this issue if any solution was beyond Waste Management's or the city manager's purchasing threshold. And I hope that answers any questions that you may have. We do want to monitor this situation, and we are happy to take any further steps and coordinate with Waste Management to try to alleviate any service issues that might be out there.
Sure. I guess the concern is, as you heard from Ms. McPeak and I've heard from others, was that when they called and said they had debris, they were told they had to pay a special fee. So then, they're immediately questioning, well, what kind of contract does the city have? And so I just want to make sure that the contract that we do have does allow for these sort of emergency pickups, or maybe if it does not, maybe we need to discuss that. But I seem to recall in the past when we've had natural disasters of this nature, they have been so good about coming out and getting everything almost immediately. So what is that status?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Waste Management has let us know that, due to Hurricane Sally and Laura, which was only, a week or two over in Louisiana, their resources are a little stretched. They're not overly stretched, but they don't have quite the full resources that they have had in past when individual hurricanes have hit. With that said, they are happy to work with us and on this current situation and see what we can, how much debris we can get out of the city. We have not seen the amounts of debris like we have seen just to the west of us. So at this time, Waste Management believes they can work with us in order to get this debris out of here. Our current contract, though, does only contemplate normal operations. If it's an emergency operation that exceeds the normal threshold, then the contract does call for different provisions to occur.
So is the advice at this time for folks to go ahead and put it out curbside and stack it as you would for normal yard debris, and they will pick it up as they can?
Yes, and we will be working with Waste Management on that. We do ask our citizens to put that out there as they normally would, adhere to the guidelines, which is, I believe, 6 feet. We'll have that no longer than 6 feet limbs, and we'll post that information. I think we already posted on social media today, but we'll continue to push that information out. And we'll have staff monitoring the city, and if we start seeing large piles, we'll be starting to address that and communicate that with either property owners and Waste Management on what we're seeing so that we can try to get that, ensure that it is properly handled and cleared out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And again, I want to really thank staff. Everybody has really worked their tails off to get services back to normal and prevent as much of a disruption as possible. And I really, really want to thank you. I know I've called out a few issues, but those are not issues involving our city. It's, working with other entities who are overburdened right now and finding out how we can all work together. So thank you.
Wait, Mayor.
Hold on, Lance. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, go ahead.
The deputy city manager sent out an email on Saturday to all the council, and that really addresses everything that everybody just talked about Waste Management. Maybe they could cut and paste that and put it out on our social media. It's a short email. I have it if you want me to read it, but it addresses everything that was just said. I don't know if you want me to read it or not.
Yeah, we'll be happy to work with that information. And again, now that we're in the recovery phase, we're going to be pushing out additional public information. Catherine and I have talked about that today, and we will be starting in conjunction with Waste Management on increasing that information first thing in the morning.
I guess the only point I want to make is that Waste Management makes it a point to say that specifically that, as you know, just let me quote one thing. Several crews have encountered electrical crews that are cutting trees along the right-of-way, leaving the materials adjacent to the roadway. And they specifically say that they're only going to pick up the 2 cubic yards each Friday. And it's going to take several Fridays to pick it all up. But they specifically note that they're only picking up 2 cubic yards at each house. So again, that information's out there. If other council members want to look at it, it came out on Saturday at 11 o'clock from Webb. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Lance, let's move on.
All right, sir. Next up, we've got an update on the Feline Friends cat service and their what normally would be it's time for their annual renewal. Mr. Warren was in some conversations with them last week, and we just wanted to bring an update to you regarding that contract and its future. Mr. Warren?
Thank you, Lance. Yes, I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, the finance director, code staff, Lorraine and myself did meet with Feline Friends. Feline Friends, we are currently contracted with them each year in order to help ensure population control of our feral cats in Destin. In discussions with Feline Friends during that meeting concerning services for 2021, Feline Friends indicated concerns of being able to meet the service levels of the contract due to issues associated with COVID-19 and also their volunteers. Due to these reasons and the timing of this, staff wanted to ask council if they would allow staff to have a little time to explore potential options for feral cat control and bring those options, if there are any, back to council for consideration at a future meeting.
So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second. Is there any further discussion on this recommendation?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
As you recall, we discussed Feline Friends last year. There were issues with the feeding stations. Webb, I don't know if you know this or not, and just as a question, do we still have feeding stations in Destin? And are they being able to empty them as they said they were going to last year?
As far as I'm aware, they still have feeding stations and they are emptying them. I just don't know to what degree their service levels are during this hurricane environment in the last month. Clearly, they are having problems with their volunteers at this stage.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion.
Can we get a second on that motion?
Yes, we did, by Mr. Marlar. Okay. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ayes have it, so moved. Go ahead. Go ahead, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, we've had conversations with the PAWS organization. PAWS has recently hired a new executive director who I trust will make some needed improvements with that organization. Right now, we are looking to council to just move forward as is. Our current contract has a 3-year term on it. We're going to ask the new executive director, once she gets settled in, to bring back some additional data that we can look at to see if they're see if the quality of their service better meets our needs in Destin, and any other recommendations she may have at that point towards the end of the calendar year or early in the next year. Mr. Warren may have some additional information on that.
Thank you again, Lance. Yeah, as everybody knows, animal control is an integral service that the city helps provide to Destin residents, and we were able to meet with the new director, Ms. Tracy Williams. We brought up some past performance concerns as well as some current performance metrics. And Ms. Williams did express a strong willingness to address these concerns and metrics moving forward. However, she's only been on the job here for a couple of weeks. And at this time, what we would like to do is give Ms. Williams a little bit of time to address some of those concerns, those service levels and metrics, and us be able to bring back some better information at the beginning of next year, as indicated in the recommended motion, which would be to bring back a report, I think, in February of 2021.
Mayor, so moved.
I have a
Mayor?
motion. Yes.
I'll jump in. Hello?
I got a motion, Steve, and I'll wait for a second, and then we'll have discussion. You'll be first up.
Second.
Okay, I got a second, so now we'll have discussion. Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Couple of questions. Who can, somebody in the city, I don't know if the city manager can answer this, who authorizes the after-hours rollout to PAWS? They're charging us $75 for after hours. Does that get approved by someone in the city before they respond?
No, as part of their contract, they take care of that on an as-needed basis.
Because if you look at these reports, there's repeated call-outs to the same location. 2 hours after they call again on the weekend, and that's $75 a pop. It's something we need to at least take a look at from the standpoint of that thing. And then, Lance, I had sent you that email. I didn't get an answer. There's a possibility that PAWS could be under investigation by the state attorney's office. And we need to review that with the state attorney only to see what, if, impact that may have on our contract. Just something to inquire with them that could impact our contract. That's all for information.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? We have a motion on the floor. Seeing none, I'll start with you, Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Okay, got
Yes.
it. Got it that time. Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Votes unanimous, so moved. Lance.
Item 4D is update on the CARES Act subrecipient agreement, and we have Mr. Jeff Kozad prepared to give you that update. Jeff?
Thank you. Yeah, the subrecipient agreement is required by the county to be able to distribute the CARES Act funds to the city. The first 25% of the allocation will be in a lump sum payment. The remainder of the funds will be reimbursement only. CARES Act expenses must be COVID-19 related to be considered eligible. We will be working closely with the program administrator to make sure that the expenses are eligible and to identify future eligible activities. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
How much does the county assess in an administrative fee to hand us the money from the federal government?
I'm not sure how much they're charging administratively. I think the whole allocation is over $2 million. But to be honest, at this point, we don't have anywhere near that we'll be billing them for. They are retaining funds for county use as well. So, some of the funds the county is receiving, they are retaining to fund some of their own programs.
Some of the funds the county is receiving on behalf of other municipalities?
No, the counties went to the state, and then the state contributed or sent those down to the counties to distribute as they saw fit.
Gotcha.
We look into it. All right. Thank you much. Next.
Mr. Mayor, there's a motion that goes along with that.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. You want somebody have that? Mr. Overdeer, you have that at your fingertips?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I move to authorize and direct the city manager or his designee to execute the CARES Act subrecipient agreement with Okaloosa County.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I got a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with you, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Lance?
We also have an update on the CARES Act, or on the COVID-19 grant program. Mr. Kozad is also going to give that update to council tonight.
Staff is requesting guidance on how to proceed with the Small Business COVID-19 Grant Program. Council allocated $103,000 to be used for small business grants to COVID-19 affected businesses. Approximately half of those funds remain unspent. The county at this time has approved 6 new COVID-19 programs. The county's Small Business Economic Relief Program has different eligibility requirements and larger grant amounts than the one the city originally had. Grant amounts can be up to $20,000. Any assistance provided by the city will be deducted from grants issued by the county. Council can choose to refer those in need to the county programs, or it can choose to restart their own program with possibly changing the criteria. If council chooses to close the city program, we will request the unspent funds be returned to the city. And I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding that.
So basically, you're just looking for some guidance on which way to go now, not necessarily in a motion form, but just through discussion. Does anyone have any comments based on this?
Mr. Mayor, there are recommended motions for this too.
Oh, that's right. There's 3, right? There's 3 options for us?
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right. Well, let's, normally I'd like to do a motion in a second, but seeing how we have 3 different options in this case, maybe we'll have a little a discussion prior to a motion being made. Myself personally, I think that maybe we could change the amount from, I think it was 2,500 to 5,000, which would help us make it a little more impactful on small business in Destin, and maybe change the one criteria that was well intended, but it also didn't take into account specifically businesses. I think the statement was you had to live in Destin if you had a business in Destin to qualify. In the case of my son and his partners who both live in Walton County, they have 3 restaurants in the Destin footprint, pay taxes here, contribute greatly to the community, and yet they didn't qualify to apply for a grant. Not saying that they would, but I'm sure somewhere else in our city we have that same issue with service, guys that do lawn maintenance and things like that, that they pay city taxes, they operate within the city, but they actually reside, their homes are outside the city of Destin. And so I just want to throw that out against the wall, see where it sticks, and get some input. I know the intent behind it, and it was a good intent, but it had some unintended consequences. I'd like to hear y'all's feelings on that, of maybe making that as an additional change to our grant program on that specific requirement.
I have a couple of questions about it, because it looks like one of the suggestions for modification so that we could try to expend the remaining funds was actually reducing a sales requirement, but then it was to increase the level of employees cap from 20 to 50, which seems sort of counterintuitive to me, because it looks like you're trying to look for smaller businesses and maybe ones that aren't sales oriented, but yet now we're looking at increasing the possibility of employees all the way up to 50, when a lot of businesses around here are much smaller. So can someone explain, because I don't know all the ins and outs of this program, am I understanding that correctly? And are there options for allowing smaller businesses and ones that maybe don't have 20 employees? Because I think that's more of what we've got around here. Wouldn't the rest of the council agree that most of the small businesses employ 20 or less?
Well, just your average restaurant usually employs 50 or 60 people. in season, maybe in upwards.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm thinking boat captains and
Yeah,
people that
of course,
were
that's a
severe-
two-man operation.
Yeah.
I don't know how many, I'm sure you guys probably don't have that information. I'm not sure how many charter boat captains actually applied for this grant. Do you have any of that information at your hands? I'm sure Northwest Florida College does. But
I do not, but I do think the number was quite low. I think I remember hearing that it was not very many.
I don't know. You know, my suggestion, I just threw it out there. You know, your concern is the same. I don't know who falls into the 50 employees or greater outside of people like in the restaurant industry. You know, maybe some of these condominium cleaning companies or something may have that many employees. I'm not sure. We got an option. We could just not spend the money. That's one of the options out there, or we can change, like my recommendation, maybe change a couple of the the amount of the grant to, you know, if somebody sees there's a $5,000 grant, they may be more apt to apply for it. That when they were first recovering from COVID, they didn't. When
Yeah, and I'm wondering, what is the scuttle? Like, what have y'all heard? Or have people not applied for this because they thought so many people would apply, there's no way they'd get it? Or did they think they weren't qualifying for it? Or
I think, you know, I'm not going to really want to be the one to make this argument, but I think Destin kind of escaped there. And certainly there's charter boat captains that haven't recouped some March and April losses, but I think the majority of small businesses in Destin have fared much better than the rest of the country, just because our tourism season was great. And so you're not, the need for that economic recovery, you know, and I can speak for restaurants certainly, you know, for some more than others, but we had a great season. Destin did, so.
okay.
And I'm sorry, if I may too, this is Webb. In our discussions, to answer your question, Dr. Ramswell, in our discussions with the county and our peer cities on this, you know, Fort Walton Beach did similar programs, and they did not have a tremendous amount of success with their programs either. And in our discussions, we were wondering if the message was diluted with so many grant programs occurring at once. And so that was why, you know, the county threw out one of their suggestions, which I think is one of the motions, to consolidate these grant programs into bigger funds that would be handled through the county. You know, it should be a little more broad, and maybe we'll draw a lot more folks into the grant program through bigger money and bigger exposure. So I hope that helps explain maybe some of the reasons that some of these grant programs weren't quite as successful.
Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we halt the expenditure of the remaining funds.
I got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Well, is that the first motion, or we're the two-part motion?
I don't have a recommended motion. I'm just sticking with the motion I just made up. I never really liked this grant program to begin with, so I'm not interested in the government running around to find people to slap money in their hands, so I'm done with this one.
All right, so we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
You got a second? All right. Well, there you go, Mr. Destin. And does anyone have any comments? We have a motion to rescind the program and keep our $60,000, I think is how much is left. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll start with you, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Menzel.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
And Mr. Braden.
Yes.
The ayes have it, so moved. We can, there's some more money for pickleball courts.
Item 4F is regarding Adopt a Street, and the staff met last week to discuss breathing some new life into that program, and Mr. Burgess is going to give a brief update on that.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Just a little update. We discussed the Adopt a Street program at our last meeting, and since then we've met, the administrative assistant in our department and I have met on this, and then we had a meeting with the city manager, deputy city manager, and others. I just want to give you an update on what we've already done, where we're kind of going with this. Staff has been actively researching other Adopt a Street, Adopt a Spot, Adopt a Park programs throughout the state of Florida, kind of seeing what works for them and what doesn't necessarily work for them. One stumbling block, I would call it, as part of the reporting process is that you actually had to fill out a piece of paper and then scan that and email it in, or traditionally mail it in. But what we're going to do is create an online form through our website that folks will be able to simply and in a matter of just seconds report on their cleanup activities. Unfortunately, tonight I was looking forward to showing you our new safety vests for our volunteers, but there was a holdup in production, but hopefully I'll have them next time. But these are DOT Class 2 vests, and they have the, I think there's a picture in the agenda, the Leave No Trace logo and the word volunteer up underneath. The application process for adopting a street initially will be streamlined using a fillable and submittable electronic form available on the website. The Adopt a Street program has been re-advertised again through our Facebook platform. I did a video for the program right after I'd first gotten this position, and Catherine kind of pushed it up to the top of the list for folks to take a look at. It's an amazing video. If you haven't seen it, I would suggest you take a look at it. We're also discussing with the city manager and the Parks and Rec director about expanding the program perhaps to more of an adopt a park, adopt a boardwalk, adopt a spot type setup. Just kind of mulling over those possibilities. And then lastly, we've been using an FDOT video, kind of bland and generalized, and we're looking to script and produce our own video, safety video for volunteers and volunteer groups, and of course that'll be on Facebook and our city website. So we've you know, when I mentioned Hurricane Sandy right at the end, we talked about Shoreline Church and these other volunteers. Destin is certainly a resilient community as far as its volunteerism is concerned, and we're just looking to try to capture that in some of our Adopt a Street or Spot or Park programs.
Thank you, Michael. Sounds good.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
I want to thank you so much. I think that's one of the quickest turnarounds on something I brought up. So I really want to appreciate the hard work that you put into coming back with such a thorough response. One question, because obviously a lot of streets have been taken and folks have their names. Do you need those folks to reapply? Because I know some of them may no longer be interested or even live here. How do you want to handle the ones that are already assigned?
We'll reach back out to them. We did this last year. When I first got in this position, we reached out to all the known volunteer groups, and they all said they wanted to continue to sponsor the street, but we just weren't having any success at all getting reports. And so we'll recap that, and maybe once we facilitate this kinder and gentler way of reporting that you can do on your cell phone, it'll certainly streamline that process and make it a little bit more palatable for those groups.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael?
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
As a 10-year volunteer in Adopt a Street program, proud Adopt a Street program volunteer, I still want to suggest to y'all that we had more success when we had a group meetup rather than just do it come see, come saw. Okay, it was a lot more productive when we all met and went out because everybody dedicated that particular time, and it wasn't on the honor system per se. It kind of motivated people. So I would just ask you to please consider that.
We certainly will.
Thank you. Lance?
We have Ms. Jankowski to give an update on the complaint policy.
Actually, she is not in attendance tonight. She had an emergency she had to attend to, Lance, so I apologize on that. But I'll do my best. We've been working on that complaint policy. I know we were working with legal on this with the last week and a half of entertainment we've had with Hurricane Sally. we are still working on this, and we do have a draft proposal that I know that Lance and our city attorney is also looking at.
Thank you, Webb. Up next, announcements, and then we'll move to the 2 consent items that were moved for general discussion. Go ahead, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any announcements per se, other than keep an eye on your calendars for these potential workshops coming up. But I think the one item that was pulled from the consent agenda with regards to the ratification of the declaration of emergency, I had asked that that be pulled so that we could add to the motion an extension of that, so that we are just clearing the way should we need federal, state assistance, and then we have our ducks in a row for that type of thing. So I'm asking for that to be added to the recommended motion of that item.
In a minute, I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Well, yes and no.
I think we have an item coming up. I think
We
that was pulled
do.
from the-
I had item D was moved to 4I, but the city manager just,
Yeah, Lance, would you mind if we wait until that item and then we'll ask council for that motion?
okay. Yeah, we don't want to be out of order.
Yeah.
I apologize. I thought it was placed after H. That's
Nope. Nope, I've got that actually last. Yeah. Up next will be item 6D, which is now 4I, resolution number 20-21, fiscal year 21 law enforcement agreement was pulled from the consent agenda. I can't remember who pulled it, but Steve, you go ahead. You had it pulled, so let's go ahead and
Yep.
make a discussion.
Sure. Just that for discussion. I don't think there's any question that I don't have to tell people that I 100% support our sheriff's office and police in general, but I just want to discuss a few things for consideration next year, well after I'm gone. As you know, we led the charge trying to get the additional 10% from the TDC. And unfortunately, they used COVID and whatnot as an excuse for us not to get that money. I think Chatham made my argument for me, and I appreciate that when he made the statement that tourism season was great. And I agree with that. Tourism season was great. Our rental homes were packed, so we got bed tax. So for them to say they don't have that money, okay, well, there we are. But I want you all to consider that next year. A couple of facts for you all to remember. You remember last year I brought this up again. Approximately 80% of calls for service from the sheriff's office are for tourists. About 80% of the calls for service come from tourists. That means for every dollar we spend in Destin as residents, we only receive 20 cents of that, 20 cents worth of that dollar. So again, I want to continue and urge the council next year to keep pushing for that TDC funding. Something to consider when it comes to this thing. Again, I'm not arguing about the money that we're going to pay the sheriff's office. My argument is why we're paying the amount that we are. Why shouldn't somebody else do it? I asked Crystal, I don't know if you ever got that information, but something that I looked at, when you look at the breakdown of the cost for the sheriff's office and you look at the automobile collision that they have there, is that collision based on the wrecks that occur in Destin, or is that across the board with the sheriff's office? I don't know if you reached out to the sheriff's office with that, Crystal, or not.
No, sir, that question slipped through the cracks, so so you would like me to reach out to the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office?
No, we had talked about that when we had the conference call on the budget. I didn't know if you had ever gotten it answered. It's just some things to think about.
Yes, actually, the captain's here, and he has an answer for you, if you'd like to hear it right now.
Sure. It was just a question.
Good evening, sir. It is a formula that's basically broke down with mileage that they do per patrol, vehicles assigned to the city of Destin, and deputies assigned to the city of Destin. It's basically a formula. It's all the other crashes that occur outside of the city are taken out and taken into consideration for that formula.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. That was a question nobody could answer. I appreciate it. Okay. So again, I would just ask everybody to consider this. Obviously, I won't be here, but we really need to get the sheriff to get on board with this and help us fight to get that extra money. Again, we were denied that money this year, but it's something that obviously we need to just keep pushing. I would just want to urge everybody to keep fighting for that extra money. That's all, Mayor.
This was pulled out of the consent agenda, so I need to entertain a motion for us to adopt this resolution.
I'll make that motion to go ahead and adopt it.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion to adopt the resolution and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with you, Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ayes have it, so moved. Up next, under 4J, will be authorization for payments to Terra Explorations and Company. So, I don't know.
I think that Lance has the council ratification up next, right?
All right, so I wrote that wrong on my little notepad. Sorry about that, I apologize. So let's go ahead and take that issue up. Do we want to start with a motion to accept and then have discussion and vote it up or down?
Lance is
I apologize once again, Mr. Mayor, for getting that out of order. I would like council to consider adding to that recommended motion an extension, actually 2 extensions, since we may not have a special council meeting next week. That would give me the next 2 weeks of keeping that active, and that way, if we, like I said, if we need to go after the state or federal funding, we have our ducks in a row for it. So I would appreciate that consideration.
I'll entertain a motion with that consideration.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the recommended motion to adopt or ratify the civil state of emergency, and also extend it as promulgated by the city manager.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none? Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
And Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. All right, item 4I. Or, no, which is it, 4J? Okay, that's it?
I think we're on to the public hearings now, correct?
All right, so now we're up for our public hearings, which now falls under item 5, and before we do that, we are going to take a 5-minute recess for purposes. At this point in the meeting, we will enter into our public hearing process. And so, Mr. Bowman, this is your show.
Yes, sir. First, we have item 5A. This is the second reading of ordinance number 20-25-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin of Okaloosa County, Florida, adopting the final levying of ad valorem taxes for the City of Destin for fiscal year 2021 and providing for an effective date. And Mayor, before we begin the public hearing portion, a couple things I need to announce. The name of the taxing authority is the City of Destin. The rolled back rate is 1.5491 mils. The percentage increase over the rolled back rate is 4.25%. And the millage rate to be levied in this ordinance is 1.6150 mils. And with that, it is a public hearing. I don't believe that Ms. Strickland has any update from the last council meeting.
Yes, Kyle, that's correct. There were no changes from the previous public hearing, so you can proceed with the hearing.
All right, and before I entertain a motion and we have discussion, I'll open up this portion of the meeting, seeing how it's a public hearing, to any comments from the public, either here in attendance. Matt, do you have anybody lined up?
No, sir, there's no public comment online.
All right. How about you, Ray?
No, sir.
And I don't see anybody approaching the podium on this, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of it, and I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move that council adopt ordinance 20-25CN on the second reading, adopting the fiscal year 2021 millage rate of 1.6150 mils, which is more than the rollback rate of 1.5491 mils by 4.25%.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll start with you, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
And Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman.
Next, we have 5B, the second reading of ordinance number 2026CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin making appropriations for certain expenditures, expenses, capital improvements, and certain indebtedness of the City of Destin, Florida for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2020, and ending September 30, 2021, and providing for an effective date, and this too is a public hearing.
Seeing how this is a public hearing, before I entertain a motion, I'll see if there's anybody in the audience that wants to make public comment. I don't see anybody jumping up to the podium. Matt, same thing for you. How about you, Ray? Any comments about the budget?
No, sir.
Seeing that there are no public comments at this point, I will close the public comment part of this hearing, and I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion. I move that council adopt ordinance 20-26-CN on second reading to provide for a balanced budget for fiscal year 2021.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion by any council members on this motion? Seeing none, we'll start with you, Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman.
Yeah, we have the first reading of ordinance number 2014 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to right-of-way protection, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for the amendment of Article 8, Transportation of the Land Development Code by creating Section 8.01.00G, right-of-way protection, trenchless technologies, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
And seeing how this is a public hearing at this point, I will ask for any public comments on this ordinance, first reading in the audience. Seeing none, Matt, do you have any?
No, sir.
Ray, any emails or texts? Well, there's no public comment on this particular ordinance, first reading, so at this time I'll close the public comment portion of the hearing, and I'll entertain a motion
Can our attorney or someone discuss this a little bit and give us some insight into what it's really doing and about?
Yeah, I think we're going to have Joe Bodie explain the technology, because this has to do with the underground boring, and when we had that issue a few months back with the damage that was caused because they weren't using this technology, but I will let Mr. Bodie get into it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dr. Ramswell, more specifically, we are limiting certain technologies, unguided boring technologies have been very damaging to city infrastructure, and staff taking an inordinate amount of time tracking down culprits and getting this damage repaired. This will allow guided boring techniques. And will also require contractor registration and licensing for the subcontractors that are actually doing the boring.
Thank you, Mr. Bodie. Help you out? Okay. All right. And we got, I've got a motion, got a second? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none?
Yes.
Mr. Braden, thank you. Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved.
Lastly, we have item 5D. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2024 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, regulating low-speed vehicles, amending Article 8 Transportation, and creating a new section 8.09.04 entitled Alternative Modes of Transportation, defining low-speed vehicles, providing for limited operation of low-speed vehicles on certain city streets, prohibiting low-speed vehicles on specified streets, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Seeing how this is a public hearing, at this time I'll take comments from the public on low-speed vehicles, and I do have a public comment from the audience. Go ahead and give your name and your address.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. Sorry, I was kind of muffled there. So here are my comments. I spoke during break and asked Matt if he would bring up the map that was in the packet. And if you'll look at the intersection at Gulf Shore Drive and Highway 98, hey, where'd it go? Are you able to zone into that there? Thank you. Zoom in. Okay, so the green, according to the legend, the green is a proposed extension of the golf cart, or what is it, the LSV? Is that what we call it? Yeah. But it's going nowhere. It's going to go to 98, and then they can't go anywhere, and across the street is private property. But that, and someone, you can correct me if I'm wrong, even the deputies, Sheriff's Department that's here, I believe that that's the most problematic intersection in Destin. We all know that I live down there, and people like to run that red light. And I cannot even tell you how often I get really worried about people crossing in these vehicles. So I wanted to tell you about a couple of things or a few things that I've been witness to from people using that intersection as it is now, where they're not even allowed to use that. There's people that aren't buckled into the vehicles. There's children that are riding in the laps of adults. There's underage drivers, and when I say underage, under the age of 12. There are baby carriers with infants. There are children's seats with children on the back without an adult sitting next to that child seat. There are no tags on vehicles. there's too many people in the vehicle for what the vehicle's supposed to hold, meaning if it has 2 seats, they try to get 3 or 4 people into that one section. I mentioned the part about running red lights. And the other thing I wanted to tell you about what I see on Gulf Shore Drive where it's currently permitted, the people still drive on sidewalks, and on Wednesday afternoon after Sally came ashore, we went down on 98, my husband and I, to check on his business, and lo and behold, there was an LSV traveling down 98 westbound in the bike lane, and he was about that much wider than the bike lane. We came upon him up by the donut hole, and I reported him to the sheriff's department. He made his way down to Rotula's, and at that point he crossed over and I think went down the hill toward the docks. But those are some of the observations that I've had with the vehicles that concerns me, and I'm very, very concerned about that intersection. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else here in the building that would like to make a comment about this ordinance? Seeing none, do you have anybody queued up, Matt?
No, sir.
Seeing none queued up on the webinar, no comments, text and email. I'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of this hearing at this time and entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion, Mayor, so we can get a second so I can discuss it.
Go ahead.
Don't have it in front of me, but I'll make the motion that we pass it on first reading. I'm looking at the map, and it's hard to change it back.
Yeah, it'd just be to pass 2024 LC on first reading.
Okay, what you said.
Second.
What he said,
Yeah.
and I got a second on what he said. That's all right. We're a little lax tonight. All right, at this point, open it for discussion. And Kyron, you said you wanted to talk first. Dr. Ramswell, I got you up second.
I have a little heartburn for Airport Road. I own an LSV, and I travel most of those streets other than Airport Road and the little section from Airport Road, Main Street, and to 98. That's the first thing. Being a 4-lane, and I know it says right lane only, but I just don't think that's going to work. I echo some of what Ms. Bell says about the people in driving them, and also younger underage drivers. The LSVs, most of the LSVs do not go more than 30 miles an hour. Mine, I've clocked at 28 miles an hour, as that's the top speed floored with a fairly decent engine. I don't think, because of the speed limit on Airport Road and the fact that it is a 4-lane, that is reasonable. That to me is going to be a safety thing. So I know that's the proposed route. The other routes around Mountain Drive, because Mountain Drive is 25 mile an hour speed limit, I agree. To echo a little bit about what Ms. Bell is talking about, we have the signalized at Stallman, which is used just across the street to go to Emerald Grand, because we have shuttle LSVs from the various business over there. And in what she was talking about at the other light, I realize what she's talking about, but otherwise the idea of the one at Gulf Shore Drive is to get them over to that private parking lot, and then they can drive anywhere they want that's allowed on that. I do see her concern, but I don't know how we're going to enforce a lot of this anyway, because unless you got somebody watching everything that's going on, I don't know how it's going to be enforced, because I have seen LSVs on Highway 98 at various times. Yeah, well, we're going to have I'm afraid we're going to have a special unit just for LSVs if we do it that way. But that's my only heartburn, is basically that section of that Airport Road and that small section of Main Street from Airport to 98.
Okay, thank you, sir. Dr. Ramswell?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, Ms. Bell brought up a good point about it essentially not being able to go anywhere else, but I'm assuming the intent was to keep the golf carts isolated and go back and forth from the restaurants and shopping center over here, 98 and Gulf Shore, to the properties back over there. Because I mean, like you guys, I mean, there's really no other way to get anywhere other than if you go into the shopping center, and you certainly don't want them out on 98. So I'm not sure that there's another solution, but we're still going to see them trying to cross at that light there coming out of what is it, Winn-Dixie and Target and all that. Have y'all, was that something that was talked about? Does anyone know that was privy to those discussions in the public, was that Public Works and Safety where this came from? I'm not sure which committee it came from.
This proposed ordinance was discussed at both Public Works and Safety as well as the LPA. That did, I believe, come up at the LPA meeting, but it's very similar, I think, to the situation that Councilor Marlar discussed at the red light at Stallman. That also goes on to private property.
Because the other thing I can see is, remember, they just built that apartment complex back there. So now you're going to have a whole other set of residents that are going to want to go to the beach, and there's going to be even more folks trying to get across. So, anyway, just thoughts.
Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, I don't, you know, I've said this before, but Airport Road isn't safe for cars. You know, so, I mean, the idea of allowing something that's not currently allowed there that is less safe than a car, to me, is just something I can't support. I mean, we will have enforcement issues, obviously, but yeah, I don't think we need to encourage any more traffic on Airport Road than we already have. And if you left it up to me, you know, I would take this map and erase about 50% of it, but I definitely don't think we need to add on Airport Road, so I won't support this.
Mayor, something Mr. Morgan said made me remember something. Weren't they going to open up this right-of-way that goes west-east from Airport down to like Palms? And if they open that, that would be a much safer path.
It's a Gulf Power easement, and it's something we talked about for our linear trail.
Yeah.
As a walking trail. But I mean, it'd be a great asset to the city, whether it's for golf carts or for just pedestrians.
Yeah, like sort of like what they do over going through Destiny, where they've opened that up, made a beautiful trail going through the neighborhoods under those lines.
My memory's fading fast as I get older, and I know we've talked about this months ago, and so with this ordinance before us, is the green areas the new proposed under this ordinance, or is it still up for final decision at a later date? Because like Mr. Morgan said, you know, he can't support the Airport Road addition, but most of the other additions to the green lines on here are acceptable in most folks' minds, I assume. So, Michael, could you explain to me, because you know, traffic's your gig too, so how do we get to the Airport Road part? I forget.
Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong. This is merely a recommended motion. It can be amended by council in any way council sees fit.
Which I plan to.
Which we could do now in the first reading, or do we have to, how's that work, Kyle?
We can take it back to LPA.
So, and while I'm mentioning the Airport Road thing, you know, the extension of Indian Bayou Trail to presumably go down to Restaurant Row, you know, the idea of a golf cart crossing the highway there where that new stoplight has been installed is just, it's terrifying to me. And I don't think it's something we need to encourage. So I wouldn't support the Indian Bayou Trail addition either. And I understand the importance of connectivity in your city, but not in ways that are patently unsafe.
So I
would move to, I'd make a substitute motion to approve what's in front of us tonight with the exclusion of the Airport Road addition, Airport Road addition, Main Street addition, and the Indian Bayou Trail addition.
There you go. I have a motion. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
And I have a second. Is there any further discussion on this new proposed motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell. See, we can't see you because the map's up, so I apologize. Go ahead.
That's, you don't need to, you can hear me. I would just say to you that you have just as many low-speed vehicles crossing at Matthews, 98 going into Publix and everything else. And the good thing, the positive thing about that is at least there's a intersection with a traffic light as opposed to just running. So if Indian Trail's no good, what about Matthews and all that? I would prefer to have the intersections with a red light where they can go safely across. That makes more sense than not. I don't know if Chatham, you want to possibly reconsider or if you're holding fast on that, but we have other intersections that they cross just as much as they do on Indian Trail. Just something for consideration.
Yeah, I think my issue is so far tonight we haven't taken away from anything that's currently allowed. And I'm not sure that, you know, I personally want to do that right now because then you're going to open a whole can of worms. And that Indian Bayou Trail intersection in particular is an aggressive intersection. I know the ones down there by you are as well, but you know, I'm okay with this. If y'all aren't, feel free to vote no and make another motion to incorporate those, although I kind of would like to add the Gulf Shore Drive intersection as well. But my motion's already been made, so I would amend my motion to include the Gulf Shore Drive intersection.
There's been, Mr. Morgan amended his original motion to include the
Second stands.
second stance. All right. So we have amended the original motion, and Ms. Ramswell, I see got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just looking, if we take out the airport main section, you've got lots of streets that go to nowhere that are blue.
Yeah, and like I said, I think connectivity is super important, but you know, that Gulf Power easement would solve that we were talking about. But I just don't think it's worth encouraging something that I personally view as dangerous.
Well, and clearly airport is dangerous. I mean, there's how many? 6 gates there on that corner now that are missing from the fence section?
Yeah, and to Miss Bell's credit, I'm on Gulf Shore Drive at that intersection 10 times a day, and it is, and I've seen stuff that is dangerous in terms of what she spoke about, and without the golf carts, that's another intersection, especially during the summer, that's dangerous. I mean, I guess all our intersections are dangerous in the summer, but that one in particular.
So building on this, and I'm just saying, how do we get the word out? Would there be signage, like golf carts allowed here but not here? Like, how do we do that?
Deputize Kyron.
Jim Woods, who is the golf cart Nazi, right? That's what they
Allow
used
me to
to
put a
call
blue
him.
light on top of my black golf cart, I'll do that.
All right, Mr. Braid.
Thanks, Mayor. Just my 2 cents on it. I get tired of dealing with all the idiots that's on 98 to start with. Tourists trying to figure out where they're going to go or where they're not going to go, and I really don't want to start dodging golf carts as well. So, I mean, if we eliminated it, all the streets, I'd be happy with it.
But that's not the motion, sir. All right, we got an amended motion, and we have a second, and I'm going to go ahead and take a vote on this, and I guess if it passes, the motion passes, you'll have to take this back to the LPA. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right, so everybody knows what the ground rules are. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Ramswell, I had It just stuck. And Mr. Braden said,
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell was an affirmative and Mr. Braden was an affirmative for the public record, seeing how I messed that up. All right, ayes have it, so moved. Back to the committee.
Mayor, actually, I wanted to, Mr. Bailey, can you make a note that for the next, next agenda, linear trail discussion, so that we can discuss that again and see what momentum we can gain?
Under your name?
Yeah, sure.
All right. That ends our public comments, or our public hearings. So now we move on to the consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept A, B, and E.
All right, I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Menschel?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
And Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Man, I got that. All right, moving on to item 7. Starting with you, Mr. Braden.
Is Lance still with us?
Yep.
Is that you, Lance?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. Hey, can you tell us why our street sweeper is not allowed on 98?
No, I cannot tell you that. We personally have used the street sweeper on 98. And I've been right there watching it go down 98 after the Christmas parade multiple years. We used it at the request of the sheriff's office last weekend on 98. I'm not sure where that information is coming from. But I'm happy to check into it if I know it better, know the question better.
Yeah, I was told in the past that for whatever reason, our street sweeper was not allowed to be on 98 for whatever reasons, but then I know that Niceville sweeps their street. So the public's been asking why our street sweeper can't go 98. Go down on 98 and get the cigarette butts and all the trash and debris out of the gutters. I personally have never seen it out there, so I was just wondering if there was a reason why they never go down 98.
Mr. City Manager, if I can add, I actually had them sweep 98 the other night. There were a lot of leaf material and sticks and whatnot, and we did the outside lane from the bridge to Airport Road, and I believe we got back to Main Street before we had filled it up and traffic started to pick up, so we went back to the shop. But normally, if we would do it, it would be in the middle of the night when traffic is lowest. Because it only goes like 2 miles an hour when it's operating.
That's correct. Well, that's great. I appreciate you doing that, and didn't know that they'd already been out there. But I was just making, for whatever reason, 3 or 4 years ago we were told that we couldn't be out there. So it's good news that we can be. I'm getting mixed messages on the Calhoun Park being flagged where the proposed fire station is going to go. When my original request to get that flagged, I wanted everything that's going to be taken by the fire department, meaning their building, their driveway going into it, any swells that they're going to take up, property for swells, their vehicles that they're going to park for their personnel and their personal vehicles, everything that they're going to take, not just the footprint of the building. So I don't know if it's marked off now or if I heard there was some marked, heard there was some cones out there, some stakes out there, but I want to be able to see everything that they're going to take, not just the footprint of the building. And that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Dr. Ramswell.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Lance already said this, but I sent an email to all of the bosses, if you will, asking them to please pass this on to the staff. But I just want to offer a big thank you and a shout out to all of our staff. They all worked tremendous during hard times, and they did a fantastic job. We've all said that, but I just want to make sure we give them all a big thank you. We appreciate everything they did to keep everybody in this city safe, number one. Number two, for city manager, we had voted and approved previously to live broadcast our workshops. Will the park meeting next week be broadcast live?
My understanding is that it will. Let me defer to Mr. Warren, who coordinates that effort.
So I'll have to confirm with Mr. Bailey. I know that we were talking about this several weeks ago, and we were coordinating with Mr. Kidd for these future meetings.
Okay, I think as important as that meeting is for people, I think we definitely need to make every effort we can to have that broadcast live.
Mr. Mitchell, we already have it reserved to be broadcast live.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Okay. Rodney, you took one of my next things. I actually had a email with the city manager and with our park director regarding that, because I didn't know if any of the tape had been blown down during the storm. And you're correct on what you said. Ms. First said that, and I have that information, that the corners themselves were marked on August the 12th. So the corners only were marked, and they put out cones today over the stakes. So at the present time, just the four corners have been marked, for your information, Rodney. Okay. Next, we all received copies of the Noriega Point survey, the most recent survey. And my question, city manager, is where do we stand on the submerged land lease application?
I'm going to have to get an update from my staff on that. I've not heard, so I apologize, but.
Okay. Just something to follow up on, please.
We'll do it.
For Michael, a question. Our generators, I know you had noted that we had a heating problem with our generator, one of our generators. Are our generators tested weekly? Do they come on automatically and they run as a test?
They do, sir. They're on a predefined schedule.
Good. Okay.
The one for the annex building was overheating. Our continuing services contractor, Metro Power, came out last Monday and made the necessary repairs.
Okay. And the last thing for city attorney, what's the update on the paperwork going to the state on Section 309 of our charter?
Yeah, our associate at the firm did some pretty extensive revisions to that. She actually just sent it to me this afternoon, so I'll review it tomorrow. If it's in a good enough form, I'll spruce it up a bit and send it off.
And can you send us the copy of that when you send it out, please?
Yep, you guys will be copied.
Okay, great.
What document was that again? I missed that.
That is the request for an opinion from the Attorney General relating to Section 307 or 309 of the City Charter.
309. 3.09. 3.09. Okay, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Ms. Overdeer.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. At the last meeting, I had brought up the realigning of 4th Street and 1st Street, and it was mentioned about having possibly put out for bid. I've been talking with Mr. Burgess, and also I talked with Mr. Bowman. Baskerville and Dunham is one of our continuing contractors, and it might cost us more to put it out for bid, plus it would take longer to get a lot of the stuff back. 8 to 10 weeks is what I've been told. And I'm just looking at the fact that now that we've got some downtime, when the boating season's over with, we could get it done by the spring when we need it again. And I'd like to bring it up and make a motion that we go ahead and have Baskerville and Donovan, since it was on the last meeting, have Baskerville and Donovan do the engineering study as I requested the last meeting.
That's a motion.
Yes.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right.
Discussion.
Dr. Ramswell seconded. Discussion?
Mr.
Yeah,
Burgess?
Mayor.
Oh, okay, go. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, I'll yield for a second, whoever was talking. Go ahead, please.
I was going to let Mr. Burgess do a quick explanation of what he and I talked about a little while ago.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, this proposed engineering drawing that Baskerville would produce would realign the 4th Street and 1st Street intersection close to Joe's Bayou, and would eliminate kind of that little cut-through lane that is seen by some as being kind of a sight restriction, because you do have to look over your shoulder pretty hard to see vehicles coming down the road. But our normal, I think this is what you're getting at, Councilor Marlar, our normal procurement process requires the promulgation of an RFQPB and then advertisement for approximately a month, whereafter it is reviewed by the bid committee, who would then make a recommendation at the next council meeting. And he asked me how long that would take. And it could be anywhere from probably 6 to 10 weeks, just depends on whether or not we have to issue any addenda as part of that process.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. And since Baskerville and Donovan is one of our continuing services contractors, it would just be cost-wise to me and to go ahead and just do it as we proposed at the last meeting. That's all I have on that, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said in the last meeting, we circumvented the bid committee, and if we're going to have rules, we need to stick with the rules. This may be important. Airport Road is just as important, and we've been kicking that can down the road for years. I'm certainly in support of this project, but I'm against breaking the rules. We have a bid committee process, and this needs to follow that process.
All right, anybody else have any comments? Go ahead, Mr. Braden.
Thank you.
Dr. Ramswell, I'll get you next.
I guess about a year ago, I was with Wayne Lung, that owns the Destin Machine Shop, right there at that intersection. For whatever reason, we were looking at his lot line, and his property, it showed it going, that pie shape actually going across 4th Street. Anybody know anything about that? His survey, it showed actually going across 4th Street.
I wasn't aware of that, Mr. Braden. The thing I mentioned at the last meeting myself was the fact that the little straightaway where that triangle is made was lined up with what used to be when it was GNS boats. And it was just an easier way for them to get the boats to 1st Street to launch at Joe's Bayou. I wasn't aware of that. I understand Mr. Mitchell's concern, but what is the use of having a continuous service contracts if we're not going to use them, and then we send everything out to bid if we've already got a continuing services contractor for these things?
Let me jump in here. Are we suggesting that this is going to be authorized for the drawings to occur right now? Or are we authorizing the continuing service contractor to come back and give us a price?
The price was in the last, at the last meeting, Mr. Burgess. Do you still have that or a rough estimate?
I can only give you a ballpark figure. I can't quote it exactly.
So and is any of this budgeted or unbudgeted?
It's technically unbudgeted, but I'm looking at it as a safety issue. Because I personally have almost gotten hit twice because I'm looking one way, and then when I turn back, I don't see anything, and I look again, and then I turn back, and here's a car coming across the little hill at Benning Drive, and either trying to turn onto 4th or going to 1st Street. And I know I've had several other people call me and talk to me about the same thing. I just look at the fact that if you actually drive it, you will see what I'm talking about when you try to look to see if anything's coming from off of 1st Street in front of you. That is the principal reason to realign this one little section. And since it requires engineering, we just can't go out and dig it up and move it like we used to be able to do back in the day. I think it would be the best course of action. But again, like I said, we have a continuing services contract with Baskerville and Donovan and several other places. If we're going to have continuing contracts, we should use them. If not, then we're just, I don't see we're circumventing the system since we already have them under contract.
Dr. Ramswell.
My question's been addressed. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Dennis?
Mayor, I have one last question.
Before I yield, and I'm going to let Steve go, my only concern is here, I don't know what the cost is going to be on this. And
Parker, I can address that real quick. I just pulled it up. It's $23,025 is the lump sum fee to pay to Baskerville Donovan for that engineering work, design work.
All right. Ms. Mitchell.
I have just one other question, maybe staff could enlighten. At the last meeting when we brought this up, one of the last things that was said by staff is, we got a problem, and they pulled it. What was that problem that they identified?
There was a question of the interaction of the CCNA, which is a Florida statute relating to procurement, and whether it would impact this particular procurement. We reviewed it, and it does not impact this particular procurement. So council can proceed forward. They can go out to bid. You have a number of options available to you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, was that $23,000 just to design it?
And what happens what are we going to do when they come back and say, well, it's going to be $150,000 to fix this? I mean, an hour ago we passed a balanced budget, and the first thing we're going to do is pass an amendment for an unbudgeted expenditure. I don't know. I see your point, Kyron, I really, really do. It's just, I think I would have liked to have had this discussion 2 months ago during the budget process so we could have earmarked it in a proper way and had it go through the proper channels. And I understand your point.
It's been that way for a gazillion years, so maybe we can address it in 2021. Go ahead.
We've got some of our sheriff's officers here, and I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously that's back in a neighborhood, so it would be local traffic, but are y'all aware of any frequency of fender benders or anything of that nature back there? My guess would be probably not, because it'd be neighbor knowing neighbor, but I don't want to assume anything.
No, ma'am. Without going and running the numbers on the computer, I can't actually pull information from intersection to intersection or roadway to roadway without having the computer. I don't have that data right in front of me. So I can get it for you if you'd like. It'd just take me a little while to get it put together.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, we've got a motion on the floor, and we've got a second. We've had discussion. Seeing no further discussion, I'm going to go ahead and take this to a vote. Mr. Braden?
No.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
No.
Mr. Morgan?
No.
Is anybody keeping score? I think nays have it. 4-3. So the motion is...
That's all I had tonight, Mayor.
All right. Mr. Destin?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mr. Morgan?
Nothing tonight.
I don't have anything. Land use attorney has some.
I do, but they'll be quick. The first item you already touched upon during public input. The workshop for the Destin Fire Control District is to be set on September 28th, which is Monday, at 6 p.m., unless you all are not good with that date. Consensus? Good? Okay. And then with the other three ordinances, this is just a status update, and there's a document in the agenda packet that gives you the update. But if you have any questions, I'll answer them, or I can quickly go through it if you'd prefer. What? Roosters is the ordinance that perhaps Councilmember Morgan might want to tell you about.
I thought it was only for bad roosters.
It's about property rights and personal freedom.
All it is.
It is to allow roosters, but not bad roosters. So that ordinance will be going to LPA. I'm sorry, that ordinance does not require LPA, so we'll be going to council at the 2 meetings in October. And then the other 2 ordinances, the RV resorts will be at LPA on October 15th, and then it will go to council with their recommendation probably in the November-December timeframe. But those will all be publicly advertised public hearings. And then the drones and kites ordinance is still in the works. So that one's going to be a couple more months.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it much. So,
Mr. Bailey, will you be sending out an invite for Monday? Thank you.
And Ray, do we need to talk about October 6th?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, it's not on the agenda, but October 6th, we are also looking to schedule a workshop dealing with undergrounding. I'm sorry, it's a special meeting according to the city attorney, so he can...
Yeah, it's a special meeting relating to the procurement of the project manager for the undergrounding project. Chef Wright will be in attendance, either in person or virtually, and the 3 bidders will come and make, I think we're looking at between 30 and 40-minute presentations on their bids, and then the council will be able to select one.
I already had that on my schedule. I guess I was the only one that got the memo, huh? I'm just easy is what it is. All right. Thank you so much.
Nothing else from me.
That means we're come up to our last opportunity for public comment, and I see Ms. Bell is standing up, so come on up to the podium, and then I'll recognize anyone else in the room, and then we'll go through the regular proceedings with Matt and Ray. Go ahead, ma'am.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Captain Howell and Lieutenant Fulgham that are in the room. Unfortunately, I've had to speak with them on several occasions in the past few months, but I want to tell everyone here that my experience has been nothing but a pleasure. I also want to thank the entire Public Works Department and Destin water users for their stormwater pump out in my area of Holiday Isle. I want to clarify for the record that you did not pump my street, you pumped the right-of-way in both of those areas. I also want to mention that waste management, hurricane debris, and trash, it's only been 5 days since it came ashore, and we were only scheduled for 1 pickup on Friday and 1 trash or regular, right, so for all the conversation that went on about that, we're only 5 days out. I have a question about short-term rental fines and violations. Those monies that are collected from that, do those go to code compliance or do they go to a general fund? Anyone tell me? If it goes to code compliance, to pay for code compliance or the general fund? Okay. I understand that the LPA still meets. I'm still a little confused why Parks Committee doesn't meet, especially while we have this big situation going on with the Clement Taylor Park. And last but not least, in the last meeting I mentioned about hoping that some garbage can rules that apply to short-term rentals can also be extended to long-term rentals and owner-occupied units. And I also mentioned that on the city website there's a landing page. It still links to places to eat and stay that does not include all tax-generating businesses within the city of Destin. We are advertising for businesses outside the city limits, and for me that appears to be more like a Chamber of Commerce instead of a City of Destin website landing page. That's all I have. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Ms. Bell. Anyone else in the room want to come up and make a public comment?
Mayor, I have a question for staff. Do all the committees have the ability to do virtual meetings like we do?
They do.
They do? Okay. Thank you.
And to answer the question on the short-term rental fees, they go to the general fund.
There you go. Thank you. All right, anyone else in the room? Seeing none. Matt, do you have anybody queued up? Seeing none there. Ray, do you have any comments, emails, texts? Meeting adjourned.